is happening, my YouTube friends and family? Good morning. It's very early in the morning. I'm heading off to the plant. Got a load going to Canada this morning. Anyway, so I wanted to take a little time and talk about braking systems on commercial motor vehicles, in particular box trucks. Semi-trucks we'll get to, but for the most part, semi-trucks all run air brake systems. We'll touch on that, and the wider variety of braking systems that you're going to find in commercial motor vehicles are going to be in your box truck application, because they run hydraulic and air. If you're using a pickup truck such as a hot shot, they're pretty much all going to be hydraulic systems. The box truck application, or your class 6 truck, will be the one that has the option to run either air or hydraulic, and then most of your class 7 run air, and pretty much all of your class 8 trucks will be running air brakes. And so we're going to touch on air brakes. I also want to talk about the different retarder systems that are available, and why you definitely want to make sure whatever box truck you buy has that. But anyway, so here goes. And you're going to have to excuse the video facing forward. I've tried recording videos in the car as I'm commuting to work, and it's just too dark in here. At least this way, it's not a dark, dreary video. Unfortunately, you're going to be bored just getting white line fever driving down the highway. So your box truck is going to be typically a class 6. That's your non-CDL. And so those are trucks that are going to be between 19,000 gross vehicle weight rating up to 26,000 gross vehicle weight rating. That is your typical class 6 vehicle. And the application for those is really simple. They are basically the non-CDL setup, and those are available with both air brakes and hydraulic brakes. So your hydraulic brakes actually have more of a variety of systems available to them, and it can get a little confusing. Frankly, I would stay away from the hydraulic system. They're not as strong. They're physically more work for the driver, and their performance is not up to par with what an air brake system has. So anyways, a hydraulic system is very similar to the system you're going to find in your personal daily driver, such as the Tahoe I'm driving right now. It has a hydraulic system that uses, oh man, my window's dirty. I guess you hadn't really seen it until the vehicle's coming the other way. You'll have to excuse that. Anyway, so the system in this vehicle is very much like the system you would find in a box truck. It is a hydraulic system, which means it takes brake fluid, and when you push down on the brake, you are basically pushing on a plunger that then forces the fluid to move to your brakes themselves, and then it uses a vacuum to create higher pressure. I haven't actually looked at this vehicle. I'm not sure if it has a vacuum or a hydro assist, but we'll get to that. So the easiest way to tell this type of system, when you pop the hood on your commercial motor vehicle, is you're going to see steel lines coming off of a master cylinder that typically is bolted onto your firewall. If it is a vacuum boosted system, you will see a big vacuum can between the firewall and the master cylinder, and you'll typically see a hose that goes from your vacuum booster, or power booster some might call it, to your intake manifold. In the case of a diesel powered truck, it won't go to an intake manifold because diesels do not make vacuum, so it'll have a vacuum pump. This is typical on pickup trucks. I know the earlier Power Strokes had a setup like that. Anyway, that is the weakest braking system available on a box truck. The slightly improved version of that would be a hydraulic system that is, they call it a hydro boost. And basically what that is, your boosted or assist comes from your power steering system. Basically they tap into some of that high pressure, and when you put your foot on the brake pedal, the fluid under high pressure that's in your power steering system actually creates additional pressure. No, it does not pump power steering fluid into your brakes, but they, through a flow divider type of deal, they create additional boost. And so those are your typical hydraulic brake systems. That's what powers the brakes. Then you've got two different styles of brakes on your axles themselves. The first one would be drum, which is, you know, a relic from the 50s and 60s. If you ever drove an older muscle car and realized, holy cow, this thing is fast, and then you go to hit the brakes and you're like, these brakes are non-existent. Drum brakes, they're effective but not particularly strong. They're really susceptible to overheating, simply because as you get the drum hot, the drum expands, and then the friction you can make between your brake shoes and the brake drum lessens because the brake drum just got further away from the shoe. A better system for that would be disc brakes. You know, most modern day cars now have disc brakes all around, and when compared to braking systems from, let's say, the 1960s, you know, modern day cars will outbrake a Corvette from that era. I guess that's kind of the best way to put it. And so in your box truck, you have two different hydraulic systems available and two different braking units themselves, basically the part that creates friction, either the drum or the disc. And so the upgrade from either of those two hydraulic systems would be air brakes. Air brakes function differently than your hydraulic systems. Your air brake system is going to have a engine mounted air compressor. Typically this air compressor is driven by a gear set, wherever your gear set on your particular motor is, either at the front or the rear of the engine. A lot of newer engines have the gear set in the rear. It declutters the front of the engine. It allows for basically a narrower hood, a narrower engine bay, yada yada yada. Frankly, I think most of your rear gear mount engines are a product of the European market using cab overs, and it's just easier to access the gear set from the rear of the truck, because that's how cab over works. You try not to service anything from the front because the cab's in the way. Anyway, and so your air brake system functions this way. There's an onboard air compressor that builds pressure, and then there's a governor that keeps it within its normal operating range. It makes the pump cut in and cut out. That's tied to an air dryer. Basically, when you hear your air dryer spit, that means your air system is completely full. And then occasionally it'll spit just to maintain the air being dry. So these systems will have a series of tanks on board. That is where it holds air to keep on reserve. And different from your hydraulic system, your braking system with air, when you hit the foot pedal, essentially you are opening a valve that allows air to flow to your axle, and that activates your brakes. Unlike a hydraulic system where your foot pedal actually creates the pressure that is moving your braking components. In this case, no matter how heavy the truck gets, your pedal remains just as soft as it was when it was empty. versus your hydraulic system. The heavier you are, the harder you have to push on your brake pedal. That's item number one that makes air superior. The second thing that makes air superior is the system itself packs 120 psi, and you have 120 psi at your disposal on a brake pedal that doesn't take a whole lot of force to activate. So it's superior in that regard. It creates much more clamping force than you would with the hydraulic system. It's also less fatiguing on the driver. So once you get to the axle end itself, very much like the hydraulic system, your air brakes can either run a drum, which, believe it or not, you can still buy brand new. You know, you can go out and spend $200,000 on a brand new Peterbilt, and it can still come with drum brakes. These drum brakes are bigger and heavier duty than what you will find in a box truck, but it's still the same technology. You get those drums hot, they expand, and your brakes fade. The other technology, and frankly, guys, if you can find yourself a box truck that has disc brakes with air, there is absolutely no comparing to anything else. The company I took a job with, where I'm hauling tankers, all of their power units have disc air brakes. Most of the traders also have disc air brakes, and let me just say, the braking potential in these things is night and day compared to even a drum air system. And so likewise, on your box truck, the safest combination you can find will be air brakes with disc. I'll see if I can't insert a couple pictures that kind of show how at a glance you can see the difference. Basically, it's your air brake can. Your air brake can faces forward and aft on any axle, and it's designed to push on the S-cam, and that generates that pushes your pads to generate the friction. Your disc system with air brakes, your can is turned sideways and faces left to right instead of forward and aft. That's how at a glance you can look, and you don't have to get under the truck or anything. You can look at the angle of the can. I'll see if I can't find a couple decent pictures and insert them where, you know, you'll be able to at a glance spot that. I recently, I believe like in the last week, uploaded a video. Maybe I haven't uploaded. No, I haven't uploaded. I'm still editing. I'm in the process of putting together a video explaining that air brakes do not force you to get a CDL in a box truck, and so as long as the box truck is under 26,000 pounds GVWR, you can get air brakes. And again, guys, strongly recommend the air brake setup. The hydraulics work, but there's no comparison in everyday stop and go traffic or even a panic brake. Air brakes will definitely make a night and day difference. Anyway, so that covers the different types of braking systems available on box trucks. Those are your service brakes. Most newer box trucks now have supplemental braking systems. Some people call them retarders, other people call them jakes. They're also referred to as exhaust brakes. These are definitely recommended. The jake brakes are typically available on your larger displacement engines, not so much on engines smaller than 7 liter. You know, don't ask me why, but they're just not available on your smaller engines. What you will find on smaller engines will either be an exhaust brake or a brake that works from your variable geometry turbo. In your Class 8 trucks, you will find that a lot of the newer trucks have a combination of jake brakes and use of the variable geometry turbo. The variable geometry turbo works. It's not quite as strong as a jake, but when used in combination with with your service brakes, it makes for a safer vehicle if you can find yourself a box truck that utilizes some sort of engine brake. Again, highly recommended. And once you get the vehicle and start using it, the rule of thumb for most of your big trucks is when you're going down a steep hill, when I say steep, we're talking a prolonged hill over 4%, so 4, 5, and 6, something like the Conejo grade or the Grapevine in California, I would consider steep, not stiff. And what the rule of thumb and the practice that I use is find the gear or the speed at which the vehicle will hold its own speed only using the exhaust or supplemental braking system. In other words, you want the vehicle to not try and accelerate once you've activated the supplemental brake. And so the idea here is to not have to use repeated application of the brake pedal, because that then starts to heat up your system, and in time it will lose some of its effectiveness. You want to keep your brakes nice and cool, and this will keep your braking system more as a reserve or kind of used for emergency braking, and this will make for a much better experience going down a hill. Find a speed at which your engine brake can hold the truck at a constant without having to repeatedly apply the brakes. Momentarily applying to bring it back down into a comfort level is one thing, but where you have to repeatedly hold the brakes for prolonged periods of time is not recommended. If this is what you have to do, then basically you're going too fast for the hill. You need to slow down a little bit and find that comfort speed where your braking system, your supplemental braking system, can hold the speed of the vehicle without the help of the brake pedal. Anyways, I hope this makes sense. Hope I'm not rambling. It's really early in the morning, and as usual, I don't take notes. I just kind of talk my way through it, and hopefully I covered all the points I wanted to cover. As always, guys, thanks for watching.